It's great to have you here tonight. By nature of you being here, it indicates that you're very interested in this process. So we're happy to have you here. And we know your time is valuable, so we're going to try to use your time wisely and be respectful of your busy schedules. I'll introduce myself. I'm Allison Brooks, and I'm staff to the Joint Policy Committee, which helps coordinate the 4 regional agencies: the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, the Association of Bay Area Governments, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and the Bay Conservation and Development Commission. That's a whole alphabet soup that I have to figure out how to say a little bit more eloquently. But I'm delighted to be here and to be asked by MTC to help facilitate this meeting. So I'll be facilitating, and I'll start by providing you a little background and then walk you through the agenda for tonight. Just the goals for this meeting. MTC is here, so we have Ellen Griffin and Ken Kirky here and others from MTC to provide an early opportunity for the public to hear, to engage and talk through the Public Participation Plan, or the PPP, before the staff even starts in the process of updating that. The Public Participation Plan explains opportunities for you to get involved in MTC's key planning and funding decisions, including the 2017 update of Plan Bay Area. And the intent of this process is to shed light on what we know and you know are complex and technical planning issues. How do we engage you in an iterative process of putting different plans together, and really try to avoid the jargon and break through some of the jargon around that. So MTC is going to release a draft public participation plan for public review and comment next month. And the schedule that has been adopted calls for adopting a final public participation plan in early 2015. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the format tonight. In a moment, you're going to hear from Ellen Griffin on the process and schedule for updating the public participation plan, as well as information on the key elements that are going to be included in that. And then we're going to, after she has her brief presentation, we're going to break up at tables, and there are MTC staff will be at each table to take notes and summarize your comments. They have some questions that they're hoping to get some input on around putting the plan together. Well, they'll be there to support the conversation and walk through those questions. Of course, there's other opportunities to tackle some other, bring up some other points as well in those conversations. And then MTC is going to post a summary of all of your comments from these discussions on the onebayarea.org website, onebayarea.org. We also have, in addition to the conversation, pens and papers at the tables for you to write written comments and provide those to staff. You can provide them to me, which will also be posted on the website. And then after we have the table discussions, we'll have an opportunity for any additional questions and answers we want to have following that. So I'd like to just go over some ground rules for this evening, and for our meeting tonight, so we all have an opportunity to participate and contribute and share our thoughts. And some of these were posted at the entrance to the room, so please try and be respectful of others' points of view. Please do not interrupt, and keep your comments civil so we can have a good discussion. And so I'm going to hand it over to Ellen now. And we also, did I introduce you, Ken? This is Ken Kirky, Planning Director of MTC as well. So Ellen is MTC's public engagement. She's in charge of MTC's public engagement activities, so she'll provide the overview.
Thanks, Allison. I'm Ellen Griffin, and first I just wanted to thank you all for taking the time to come. And I wanted to just start with some basics. What is the public participation plan? And there is a frequently asked questions handout for you at the tables. But basically, it explains to the public how to get involved, and it highlights the key technical planning and decision milestones for the major plans and programs. And it's done to meet requirements in state and federal law. And it also really is necessary in the Bay Area. It responds to the culture of our region that demands a good, robust policy discussion. So we adopt a public participation plan every 4 years in advance of the long-range plan, what we're calling Plan Bay Area. And it has some guiding principles for public participation. I just thought I'd list them there. It basically is designed to make sure that the public can understand how to get involved. It requires relationships often. Once you have to tailor your outreach depending on your audience. And the goal is just to always make it simple for people to engage. The public participation plan schedule, and this is also listed on your handout there. Basically, we're at the beginning here. We've had a few meetings with local government staff. We've been out at community events and done some surveying there. We have launched an online survey where you can go to our website, onebayarea.org, and comment. But basically, we plan to introduce a draft public participation plan for a 45-day comment period on November 7th. There'll be a presentation at our legislation committee later that month. The close of comment period will happen towards the end of the year, and we will present a summary of the comments we've heard and any recommended changes in January to our legislation committee, which has jurisdiction over public affairs at MTC. And if significant changes are made to the plan, we would re-release a draft for a second or additional comment period. So the final commission action on the public participation plan would be either in January or March of 2015 if a second comment period is needed. One of the most important elements of the public participation plan is Plan Bay Area. You could look at this as a plan for the plan. And we partner with ABAG on that update. And so I just wanted to give a little bit of basic information on that process. We're looking to do a focused update in 2017. That process will kick off sometime in mid-2015. And the emphasis is just on maintaining the system we have, keeping our infrastructure in a state of good repair, and there'll be integration of other regional initiatives, but it isn't anticipated that it will be they're not going to start with a blank slate on that one. And some of the key milestones in that planning process, it'll start out with goals and identifying goals and ways to measure performance. There'll be transportation projects and an evaluation of the effectiveness of those projects. There'll be regional forecasts that are done for travel and housing and the economy. Those will feed into scenarios that will be reviewed, and then from that a draft and final plan and companion environmental impact report would be issued, and the schedule calls for an adoption in 2017. So I did just want to give a little bit of background on the plan. Then I wanted to touch on some of the ways that MTC works to keep the public involved. Just like tonight, we have public meetings and workshops. We're required in statute to have public meetings for the plan update, and we anticipate having many more of those. The statutes also encourage us to try to present information in a way that's easier to digest for the public, so they encourage use of visualizations, maps, interactivity online to allow people to dive in and better understand some of the issues. We often partner with community groups to survey members in low-income communities and communities of color. Often we have focus groups if we want to dive in and hear a little bit more qualitative information from the public. We issue printed materials. We're doing less of that and having more online, but we realize you can't have everything online. Some people actually need a piece of paper in their hands. We will do targeted mailings and flyers, as well as electronic versions of those. And we also brief the local media. We have brown bag lunch sessions with interested reporters, keep them updated on the process. And we do polling and survey work. Sometimes we do man-on-the-street interviews, or we table at community events to get the word out. We have a website dedicated to the plan. Right now it's onebayarea.org, and MTC also has a website for its other non-plan related stuff, and it's a great source of information on our meetings, and you can listen on the web to the meetings, live streaming. And in fact, this meeting tonight is being audio cast, just FYI. So you have a chance to weigh in early in this process. We haven't even drafted the plan. We'll have discussions tonight. We'll look at the comments from our online forum, and we will issue a draft, as I said, in next month. And often we get asked, what do you do with the comments? So I just wanted to let you know that we will review everything we hear tonight for consideration and inclusion in the draft plan. We'll summarize the table discussions and post those on the web. And any individual comments, we have comment sheets at the tables as well. If you care to leave a comment in writing, we welcome that. We'll also post those online, providing we can read them. And we'll share all the comments with our commission. And so the table exercise, we have a couple, 8 questions to be precise, that we wanted to discuss with you, and then also give you the opportunity to cover anything else you want to tell us. But you know, sometimes it's simple things like, what's the best way to reach you? Do you prefer email? Do you like to get stuff in the mail? Do you like both? What are opportunities to hear from the public that get beyond meetings? Because we realize not everyone can make a meeting. What are best practices for presenting pretty detailed information? Have you participated in a planning process elsewhere that you thought worked well, that you wanted to highlight for us? What do you think of social media? Is that a useful way for agencies to keep the public engaged? Are there local planning efforts happening that we should team up with? And I guess, and also we're interested in specific feedback on the last plan process, for the last Plan Bay Area process. What worked, what didn't, what needs improvement, and if there's any ways that maybe you belong to an organization, if there's ways you could assist us in getting more people engaged, we'd love to hear it. So actually, I'll back up. So with that, I would encourage everybody who's not at a table to join the discussion.
How about public comment at the mic?
Yeah, we're going to have time for public comment at no, right, actually, right now we're going to.
That's part of the problem.
You
You guys don't listen to us.
We have these tables set up for sharing your comments here. And then there's a question and answer session after the table comments for.
Table? Ridiculous.
Yes. Let's hear.
I would like to give public comment right now.
Yes.
So
Public participation, you wanted our.
we have a public participation process that we've set up for you to engage, to provide comments, and then there's an opportunity for public comment after
Do
that.
that now.
No, we actually have an agenda for that. And that's the agenda. So we're going to break out in tables. You can provide comments, and then we will have time for public comment.
About the agenda.
Yeah.
How about a conversation about the agenda? This is supposed to be about
That's
public
right.
participation.
I'd like to give a 3-minute public comment statement now.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering, how does this process work at the table? Will we be hearing, will we be talking with a staff member, I think, from MTC?
Yeah, and there's going to be an opportunity to have a dialogue, and you can also write comments, and there will be a staff member there. We're trying to get input on the plan and the process, and then we will have time for public comment. So that's what we're going to do, and then we'll have time, sir. You can have your 3 minutes after we have the opportunity to sit at the
I'm not going to
table.
sit through the time at the table. I'd like to give that now.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. My name is Margaret Gordon.
Mike, please, we can all.
Yeah. Come to the mic, so.
I talk real loud.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Margaret Gordon. I'm from West Oakland. And I think and I want to talk about the process. Because you said a keyword. You said a keyword. Our agenda. This is not our agenda. This is your agenda.
Right.
Amen.
Let me finish. I'm a big girl. I can talk for myself.
Go ahead.
Go up to the microphone,
All right.
please.
All right. So, first of all, this is not a agenda that was planned by the body here as part of public participation, and it's not meaningful if the voices in here are not being heard about what they like or they dislike. And I know you might not have been prepared for that, but that's part of the democracy and understanding participation. It has to flow from the bottom. It can't be flowing from the top. And you might not have that intention. You might not have that intention, but that's how you're coming across. So when you do these tabletop exercises and the audience is making a request, you got to build the time in to deal with the request.
Ma'am, the time was built into the agenda.
I know, but
after the conversation at the table.
Yeah, but just to say that if the audience asks to change the script of the agenda, you need to be able to say, well, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Well, the
I'm just
audience,
saying-
there's multiple people in the room,
Okay,
and
but
there's
you
one
didn't-
or two
but you
people.
didn't even- But I'm just
If
also,
we're
I'm trying
running-
to help.
if we're running a
I'm trying to help you
democracy,
here.
then-
I'm trying to help you here. I'm trying to help you here. You need to listen to what I'm trying to help you here.
Right.
All right, and you need to listen. If you had a different kind of approach and say, those in here who would like to change the agenda to hear the public comment, that's something different. You didn't even ask that. You said we're going to follow this agenda. You didn't ask those to raise their hand, stand up, if they would like to have public comment first. Okay?
All right, well, what do you, fine, you go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you for accommodating our request. I'm Peter Singleton, and I just wanted to share that I believe this whole public participation process is completely illegitimate and an utter sham. And I base that on a number of reasons, and one of which is that the agencies did not consider whatsoever the public comments that were submitted on Plan B Area 1. So you're assuming that this is just a tweaking or a tuning of an already sound process, but it is not a sound process. I read many of the hundreds of comments that were submitted to Plan B Area by citizens, by experts, by cities, by organizations, and it was an overwhelming and an incredible body of evidence, and it showed conclusively that your plan does not achieve its stated goals. Plan B Area does not work. The transit elements will not increase transit ridership. They will not reduce greenhouse gases. That is a slam dunk point that was made in the comments. The land use elements don't either. They don't improve, they don't reduce greenhouse gases. That's a little more controverted, but I think we raised significant questions about that. So if this is a transit plan, it's a land use plan. If it achieves neither of those work, does it achieve anything? Well, it turns out the plan is extremely good at several things. It sharply limits how we can live, where we can live, how we can travel, where we can travel. It works really well at that. Second, it enriches a vast ecosystem, vastly enriches this huge ecosystem of so-called nonprofits, government agency officials, crony developers. They're the people that are getting rich off of this. The average public, the ordinary citizen, is paying for it and is losing their livelihood, is getting displaced by these massive crony developments that you're doing in inner cities and in city centers. It does nothing to help lower income residents. It does nothing to improve the economy. It does nothing to help the environment. This is an utter sham. And I'm speaking to you, I've said this before, I'm speaking to you as a neighbor and as a friend. The public, when they find out what you're doing to them here, is going to hold you accountable. Take that seriously. They're going to hold you accountable. You guys are carrying water for the 0.001% who've decided to limit the way we can live and how we can travel where we can travel. You shouldn't be carrying water for them. You should be on our side. Thank you.
So part of what this meeting is about is to help to find strategies to make sure the public knows what's going on. So we're hoping to get input on that tonight as well.
My name is Mimi Steele. I have some questions. How will neighborhoods this time around get local representation instead of discovering by surprise that they've been nominated for high-density growth? How can neighborhoods that don't want high-density growth that may happen to be near transit opt out? You never give us an opt-out option. You only give us a set of 4 or 5 options and say, which of these do you want? Maybe we want none of the above. And maybe some of the cities need to have the option to pull out of this plan. How will local residents this time around have the more significant representation that they merit on the local land use decisions over and above the voices of minority groups that seek to impose alternate visions on their neighborhoods, but who may not live in those neighborhoods and may be a small number? What will the process be this time when a comment is made on the plan by a resident? Because as Peter said, our experience from the last round was that none of the adverse comments were taken into account or referenced. They may have been way back in the appendix, but they were never referenced in the executive session. And if you looked at the executive summaries, you would think that everybody in the Bay Area agreed with the plan, which is not correct. Finally, on the issue of outreach, you know, if this were Fleet Week, everybody in the Bay Area would know all about it. I want to know why you can't get the word out to people in the Bay Area. It seems to me that maybe there's a little bit of a concern that once people understand what is being done to them, as Peter suggested, they may not agree. And this room would be full of people in opposition. So how are you going to get the word out meaningfully instead of just going to several of these NGOs that are profiting from getting grant money from you in order to conduct these outreach programs? And the final thing I want to say is there's a great deal of attention paid in your documentation to making sure that low-income communities participate. That's fine. I think they should participate. But I want to say that the people that are paying for this, which includes low-income communities that are working poor, as well as people like me who work a full-time job and have to come out and take a day off to participate in some of these things, where are you in our communities? You are not there. You're not talking to us. You're not letting us know that these meetings are going on. There's a decided effort on your part, whether intentioned or not, to really limit who gets access to this information. And I'm really tired of that. Thank you.
I just want to, ma'am, we're asking for your input on strategies for how to better reach out to people. So that was just to reiterate your questions. That's what we're asking for input on how to do a better job to reach out to the folks that you believe need to be more part of this process. So if you have any suggestions, that's what we're at. Great. So that's what we were hoping to break out in the tables and ask for your specific suggestions on how to do that better. If you want to write those down or provide those comments, we're here. That's what this meeting's about, is to do a better job. So I mean, so that's what we're asking for your feedback on.
It seems to me, just looking around, we have a really Well, Fred Volking. We seem to have a small representative of people, whereas this is going to affect a huge amount of people, huge. This is all done by regional groups. I don't remember seeing that in the Constitution. And if you had listened to several of us before One Bay started, or you passed it, we asked if you put it to the voters. If you'd have put it to the voters, you wouldn't have had to worry about how you get information out. They would have heard about it. I speak to people all the time about it, and they don't know about what you're doing. Very few people have any idea what you're doing. And when I explain it to them, they get a little upset. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Zelda Bronstein. I live in Berkeley, sat on the Berkeley Planning Commission for 7 years, chaired it for 2, and helped to draft the city's first new general plan in 25 years, so I have some experience with public participation. 3 things. What happens to the comments? I commented extensively on the particular issue that interested me in Plan Bay Area 13, 2013, the draft at least, industrial lands and zoning, 6-page single-space letter, cited in the environmentalist lawsuit, Fabag and MTC, successful lawsuit. The wording appeared just the same, word for word, in the final draft. Mike and I have also looked at a lot of the public comments. I'm a journalist. I've written about Plan Bay Area. I'm going to write about this meeting and about Plan Bay Area 2017. My impression is that the comments are, you don't care. You have to do this. You're legally required to do this, and you may be well-intended. I'm not going to question your personal motives. But the way it works is, it's just a dog and pony show. The table discussions, I refuse to participate in them. I'm familiar with this method. What it does basically is fracture the public authority and leave all the authority up front with the staff and the officials. What we need, we have a small group here in any case, we could have a discussion with the people who are here. I want to hear what everybody thinks, not just what 3 people at my table think. And I want to have, if possible, an opportunity to comment on that. My last point, I spoke last week at the Regional Advisory Working Group meeting. I'm not going to go through everything. I may write something, but I probably won't, because I wrote last time at length, documented, did a story on it, had no effect. You're kicking this off on November 7th. Thanksgiving is on November 27th. Nobody outside of zoning junkies, planning junkies like myself, pays any attention, and even we, after Thanksgiving, forget it. So this is essentially a 2-week public comment period. You need to stop it and start it again after the new year. This is not the right time to launch a public participation comment. It's the worst time in the year for public participation in planning. Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Chen. I'm from Saratoga, California. We have a lot of folks in Saratoga who would like to participate in their transportation and housing future. When they hear about Plan Bay Area, they really never heard of it before, or they've been hearing about it the first time. So I myself like some of the ideas in Plan Bay Area. You know, I'm not a NIMBY. I like to have mass transportation, and I like to have high density where it makes sense. In Saratoga, though, the way we do things is we have workshops at the city level. The city council, for example, organized a workshop with regards to the Highway 85 expansion. Now, one of the things that we're seeing is that there are all these transportation projects that the VTA is doing and that the MTC is doing, and we don't have any public participation. We get 2-week notice that there's a public comment period, and we have to respond to that. So when people don't get a notice, if they don't get some kind of news article that informs them, like, for example, even just an article in the San Jose Mercury from a public agency would be nice. You know, you have people who do press releases and who communicate. So that kind of outreach is very helpful. And especially in the South Bay, we don't have good mass transportation. I'm talking about the West Valley, but what we're seeing is that there's a lot of development on the east side of the valley. So you get the BART extension, and you get light rail connections from Mountain View to San Jose. But we don't have anything on the west side in the Cupertino, Saratoga, Los Gatos. Those people who work in high tech in Mountain View at Google, they live in the West Valley, and we could surely use at least a better bus service and more consideration of having light rail lines as well. So my suggestion is that you reach out to the folks at the city level and have city workshops. I think that would be a good way to get people involved. Otherwise, when they get stuck with notice that there's a highway expansion happening in their backyard, they get very upset.
Great, thank you. That was
Thank you.
constructive feedback.
Like I said earlier, my name is Margaret Gordon. I'm with an organization called the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. And for the last 22 years, all my work around the environment and transportation, housing, jobs, everything has been about West Oakland. So like I said, I want to help you here. I'm going to give you some meaningful suggestions and recommendations. You do not do tabletop exercising unless you have built relationships with your audience. All right? You don't plan, it would be much better you had a blank slate coming into this room and ask them people, would you like to brainstorm first, before you just went into this whole agenda program based on not having their input. I live in West Oakland. See, West Oakland is known for tearing up stuff. Seriously tearing up stuff, and you have to start all over again. And one of the things you have to do is build relationships. And it does not sound that you have done a good job meaningfully building relationships. I'm going to give you two good examples of looking at what public participation is about. You have the EPA have a website called Meaningful Public Participation. You need to look at that. I worked with EPA in West Oakland for the last 8 years, and we set up what we call a collaborative model of looking at how do you not only look at things from the built environment, but also look at the economics, look at everything, look at the whole community as a whole and not in pieces and parts. And also, how do you build those relationships to be able to communicate those things? And also, if the plan don't work, how do you mitigate it? That's part of the problem. When you have such traditional ideas on what is meaningful, no. Meaningful means go beyond what is traditional and getting your plan together with community. That's one. Then also you have to be in a place where you can adjust it. You need to be a place where people can hear that you really hear and that you try to adjust your plan based on what's happening in their community or their needs. Then also you need to have, like the gentleman said, as co-lead partners with each area. Each city to be having a workshop. Not people have to come from all over just to the central place of your office to have this workshop. And also you have to look also what has been historically underserved communities when you start identifying projects, program, and look at the tools, resources, and the leadership development that you want to ensure that people have to be able to be part of the process. If you're not going to do those things, you're going to continue to have people, them and us, and it should be about we. And I'm just hoping that the next time that you really try to hear these recommendations. And the last thing I want to say, you also could go on the website and look at Porto Alegre in Brazil, how those people really engage the community when you have a plan they want to present to the community. And so it's really drawn out to be able to hear what the people, down to the children, what they think their community should look like, or what a plan should look like for whatever. Housing, jobs, whatever. But just to do something that is all pre-described, you're gonna have a problem.
Thanks, Ms. Can I ask you a follow-up question, actually? Thank you for that feedback. I think that was helpful in terms of the process. So what are your suggestions for how we build relationships?
What is the first thing?
Because I would assume, just because the way I look at it is sometimes in small groups, it's a better opportunity to build relationships with people when you can break out and have a conversation. That's usually how I build relationships. But do you have suggestions on how we could have designed this better?
A fundamental thing. You didn't even go around and ask people to identify themselves. Just at anybody's house you go to, you got to introduce yourself. That's basic.
Sometimes it depends on how many people in the room. If we have 300 people
you have
in the
to
room,
do some
it'd be
things
harder to do
intentionally. You want to build relationships, we got to do some intentional, non-traditional things. I just got to say in it. You should have went around the room and asked everybody their name. Everybody here don't even have a name tag. You got a name tag.
They're at the desk
Okay.
If you wanted to.
All right. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. This is some fundamental things of just basic good manners. Mm-hmm. All right. Like you came across with rules of the guiding rules of the meeting, right? But there's also just some basic common sense things. Ask who are the people in the room, where they come from, and being able to say, okay, have some kind of relationship, some kind of connection. You didn't even do that.
Okay, thank you.
That's very fundamental.
Thank you. Great. So can I ask one question while we can keep the public comment going, but not everybody is comfortable getting up in front of a mic, and that's another reason why you try different formats to include people. So if there are other people that do want to have the opportunity to break out into in the table discussion, can you just raise your hand and just to make sure that we'll have time in the agenda to do that? Or we can just open this up for this comment period. Does anybody want to break out into the table discussion? Yeah.
Do you mind saying where we are in the agenda?
Well, there's not so our agenda was basically we're in the last two. We were going to have a public comment period, and then we were going to have table discussions. So it's 7:08 right now, so I just want to make sure that we have time to do that. So some people do want to do that. Do you want to? Okay. All right. Okay, great. So we'll let everyone speak, and then we can do that if we have time.
Hi, my name's Dwayne DeWitt. I came from Santa Rosa. Usually I use public transit wherever I go, but today that trip would have taken 4 hours, so I drove. I like public transit. There's benefits. What I'd like to see you folks do is help it to become more coordinated, have the schedules work so that buses, you can transfer off of them onto other buses without waiting 25, 30 minutes between the next one. Just basic stuff like that. And I believe if you want public participation, that you make these people feel comfortable by letting them see their comments in your documents. People like to be able to look in a document and find the page where what they said is, so they know they were heard. I know I wasn't really heard during the Plan 1 Bay Area, and I know that my community got some funding from MTC because they worked to get what was called a priority development area. And I had advocated for that in a spot called Roseland, where I'm from, and I think that's a nice idea in some ways. They've already gotten $200,000 to begin a planning process, but the city staff just sits on it, and they haven't really involved us community members. But I find out from reading documents that they've been in the process for 2 years, and that they're doing things already. And then they'll call us in and have a comment period like you've done here and say, okay, get it all together in 35, 45 days. And yet, it really seems like, for most of us from our community, that that's an afterthought. We weren't really a part of the planning process. We're just coming in so they can check off a box, thank you, and then tell who else down the road that is in the funding business that they've done this. So if you'd really like participation, start it at the very beginning. Invite the people right as you're planning in the staff meetings and allocating the money and delegating where things are going to happen, and say, yes, these meetings are open. The public can come and observe, and they can participate. We're polite people. I haven't seen anybody here be rude. They just wanted to speak now in case they had to go and catch a bus or a BART and get home before 9 or 10 at night. Speaking at the beginning of the meeting can be helpful to you folks because it'll let you know what's on the mind of the people who've come. Don't look at us as adversaries or opponents or challengers. We're actually citizens and taxpayers. We're the funding source. I like to think of that, the original funding source. Yes. Oh, it's a good feeling. I like being an American, and you'll take my tax money whether I like it or not. So just let me feel like I'm a little bit of a part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Adam Garcia, the policy researcher at Greenbelt Alliance. Thank you for all these great comments tonight. I think it really gets to a real fundamental challenge that we're facing where cities still retain the sovereignty to make those decisions. So having them being leaders in this discussion and engaging with people of what they really want, I think is important. But at the same time, we're realizing and understanding new things about the world, about, Stanford is saying that our drought now is tied to climate change, and that's a big deal. And these decisions that we have to make as a society that, we can't opt out of society are collectively impacting us. So I think it is a really valuable discussions to make sure that public participation happens at the city level first and builds up towards the visionary plans that the Plan Bay Area gets to. I had three suggestions for moving forward of recommendations for improved stakeholder engagement. For one is, I think, having very clear targeted meetings for Plan Bay Area that are looking at the business community, the open space community, elderly. Youth is obviously largely underrepresented in a lot of these discussions. So being very clear that, as we have different interests about this larger plan, that we have those targeted stakeholder community meetings as part of the process, listening sessions, perhaps, if you will. Secondly is taking this ambassador approach, similar to making sure that the cities are the ones relaying a lot of the interest, concerns of the people. A good example of how this is implemented is in San Jose with their general plan task force. There were a lot of different interest groups, community representatives that were in charge of reaching out to their local community as the general plan was being updated so that they could give their best input. They were empowered with maps, with best information that was there. That was really laying out the different scenarios that they had to choose from in their general plan update. One suggestion would be potentially the Regional Policy Committee as an appropriate body for this, or many other ones as well. And lastly, I think, kind of getting to this idea, is that this has to be a really good inspirational and framing document that can address these real tough issues. I live in San Francisco around displacement. And how we can make sure that there's enough affordable housing for people with lower paying jobs to be able to live and work like I do in the same city. So I think it's really important to figure out how this can be a vision to empower better bus rapid transit, for instance. I think that's a really valuable thing that a lot of these cities, the South Bay, as well as all over, need to be able to have some better tools that, as VTA, can be better empowered to improve the regional transportation. So I'll close with that and trying to just be inspirational for this plan.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? Are you paid by Greenbelt Alliance?
Yes, that's correct.
Has Greenbelt Alliance got grants from MTC or ABAC for this plan, or in the past got money from them?
I believe there's some conservation work that we're doing.
But it does mean that
I don't think we're going to question
I'm not
the
sure
people
if
that are making
that's
public
relevant.
comments. Well, that's what the tables were for.
Yeah,
So we're not going to have a...
You
We're
can
not
join me
going
at the
to-
table afterwards. I'm going to stick around. Thank you.
question.
Who else? If you would like to get up and speak, sir, you can do that.
In a public meeting, if somebody comes in from an organization supporting your plan and has been paid by you, right, that needs to be clearly stated. Because otherwise, you could load this meeting with a load of people that you've paid to be here and support the plan. That is not public input, and it is not democracy. Okay? So fine, I think you should be able to come up and state that, but I think you should be able to say, you're from Greenbelt Alliance, you're paid by Greenbelt Alliance, and Greenbelt Alliance has received grant money from MTC and ABAC in the past. That's fair, it's honest, and it should be done that way. So it is clear that you have a vested interest in this plan, and MTC and ABAC have a vested interest in paying you. Okay? And that needs to be honestly stated.
Well, I don't think he knows the answer, and I don't actually think we're clear on the answer. So we'll have to get back to you on that.
Do you agree, though, that it is reasonable that anybody who is paid by an organization should state that when they speak at these meetings, and that they will state if their organization has received grant money from MTC or ABAC?
Seems sure. But we,
good.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody got that? Sure. Okay.
I'm not. I'm not here. I don't have the definitive answer, but
Well, I think in terms of democracy and honesty, this is the problem with the original plan. Now, in terms of public participation, the initial plan that you presented in 2011, you hired a firm from Vancouver, Canada, who clearly stated in their documentation that they would get support for your initiative. They clearly organized the questions so that it was not possible to answer them to do anything but agree to the plan. And then they attempted to cut off public comment so that those of us who had questions such as, what is the cost per ton of carbon dioxide reduced by this plan? Well, it turns out the plan doesn't reduce any. So, for instance, when a person from Greenbelt Alliance said, we've got a problem with global warming, fair enough. But this plan has nothing to do with that because it doesn't save any carbon dioxide. For those of us who then said, well, what's the most efficient transport per cost per passenger mile, your staff had no idea. Now, you've got to be honest with people and say, look, this plan has a lot of flaws. If you're going to have good public participation, explain the flaws, the good points, the bad points, rather than just saying, we're going to judge. What I think originally what happened with this plan is you say, we'll judge if we can get it through the public against the opposition. It's badly flawed, it's incompetent, because it doesn't do what it's supposed to do in the first place. In terms of these tables, 2011, in Contra Costa County, I sat at one of these tables for East Contra Costa County because I've always been interested in their issues. And the MTC person said, great. Where do you want your extra housing, right? There were about 10 people there from East Contra Costa County. And they all said, great, yeah, we don't want any more because that's where all the extra housing has gone in the last 20 years. Okay? And the MTC person said, no, but you need to have a share of it. They said, what do you mean our share? We've already put in our share. The traffic's terrible. We don't want any more houses until Highway 4 is widened, we get real BART, and Vasco Road is turned into a freeway, right? And she said, yeah, I know that, but what about putting the houses? And she showed us pictures, nice pictures of these houses and where they should go in the old industrial centers of Antioch, Pittsburgh, etc., right? And the table said, what are you talking about? Don't you get it? No more housing until Vasco Road's made into a freeway, Highway 4 is widened, we get real BART, because the traffic's terrible. And finally, after this went about 5 times, she began to get it. Said, oh, you don't want more housing until you get better communication, better transport. Right, okay, great, good, right? So then she took all these notes about it. So then the plan came out. What did it show? More houses in exactly where it had been on that plan. It was a waste of time. There wasn't any idea that this was going to be taken seriously. If you want good public participation, you actually have to take it seriously. And it's messy, it's difficult, and your plan has got to be changed because it's inadequate. It doesn't do what it's supposed to, right? And you've got to be honest with people. So I want to see if you want public participation, admit the flaws in the plan. Say, how can we fix it? It doesn't save carbon dioxide. We were wrong. Do you admit that? Do you admit that?
I'm not in the position. If you,
So
if,
do you
if
even
have,
know?
If you have specific comments
I
right
have
now
a
on the process, and it sounds like what I'm hearing as a suggestion from you is that we need more transparency, and we're getting comments and more transparency and communication on the challenges in the plan and on achieving some of these
Right,
goals.
and the honesty of the fact that it doesn't do some of the things it claims to do. Do you admit that? Do you admit that it does not save carbon dioxide as it was supposed to do?
I'm not in the position to admit that, and
So
no,
do you
I'm sure.
actually even know?
Well,
Do any of you
we're
actually
we're
know
not
that?
At this point in the process, we're not having a conversation about that.
I can answer that specific question. The plan does. So my name is Randy Rentschler. I run public affairs and legislation here.
Yeah.
So I said, my name is Randy Rentschler. I'm the manager of public affairs and legislation here. This is a meeting that we are conducting in order to get your public input.
Yeah.
So I think a few things. The first thing is we're here to hear from you, all right? We're not here to answer all your questions because often we don't know, but they're fair questions and we will take them under advisement. I think the second thing is we don't get the right to intimidate and question other commenters, even if you feel you're righteous. So we're not here to have a back and forth, to comment about everything you're asking for. We're here to listen to you, and then we will take your comments under advisement. So let's.
Okay,
let's
good. Well, the next meeting, let's get some of the answers. That sounds terrific.
All right.
Thanks.
My name is Mimi Steele. I have two more comments that I think are really important, and I think the reason you're getting the pushback you're getting is that this plan, just admit it, this plan is a top-down regional plan. You are dictating to the cities what you want them to do. This is backwards. It should be the cities developing their plans and then coming to you and giving their input to you that gets combined up into one plan, if there even should be a regional plan, which I heartily discourage. The second thing is there's nothing in your plan that deals with technology. How many of you could have envisioned the internet and the fact that people telecommute these days? How many of you could have envisioned what was going to happen with the self-driving cars? How many of you could have envisioned innovative companies like Lyft and Uber that in fact San Francisco is trying to shut down and may actually be much more economical in terms of transportation issues than building these big infrastructure projects and more BART and more buses and everything else. There's nothing in your plan that even acknowledges that the technology is going to change as we move forward. So you're left with this utopian vision that you guys are the masters of the universe and you can predict for the next 25 years what's going to happen, and you're going to impose that on 7 to 9 million people in the Bay Area. And that's just not right. That's not America. That's not freedom. That's not liberty. That's top-down, central, Soviet-style planning. Thank you.
I think now that we're at the point where we're asking for comments from people that haven't spoken, and then we're going to break out into tables. That is our agenda. So this isn't just, everyone can come up as many times as. Yeah, please, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Pam Drew, and I'm from Marin County, and I'm neither as brave nor as angry as the people who have spoken before. But I do have to agree, having been to many, many of these same kinds of meetings, starting with 2010, that you as a group have lost credibility and trust. Now, I don't think I started out being paranoid when this process started in 2010. But just the sight of these tables when I walked in, I couldn't bring myself to sit down at one of them because of what had happened in Marin County with the clickers. Whenever we had been herded in, we sat down at the tables and we saw the questions, and the questions had very limited responses, and we were supposed to click 1, 2, or 3. And then when we realized that the options were not for us, that it wouldn't accommodate any of our actual views, we stopped using the clickers. And then I went to the trouble to find out what happened to those people who took the trouble to come to the public participation meeting and to start out, but then stopped with the clickers. And what happened was those incomplete surveys were discarded. They were never included in the number of people who participated. Our comment or our presence or whatever was completely deep sixed. I called and tried to ask to make sure that the people who stopped clicking got included. They were not included. It didn't matter because the public participation didn't matter and doesn't matter. The public participation is to check off the box, to agree that you've done the statute, and so that you can go right on. Your track record from before, you mounted your offensive, you won, you got some pushback, and now you're saying we're going to do it a little different, we're going to be a little better. Well, what you're going to have to do is to go back and reestablish some sort of trust, because nobody trusts you. I don't believe anything that I read in your brochures anymore. And if I hear of one more vibrant development, I don't know what I will do. I probably will just start tearing my hair out. Surely you understand these things. There's such a gulf between you and the people. And notice you're all white middle class, or actually probably upper class people up there, and you're probably pretty good people. I've talked with Ken Kirky. I know he's a pretty good guy, but he's running this thing, okay? So where am I? I'm nowhere, and I'm nobody. I don't count.
Hello, my name is Tanya Love. I'm going to be perfectly frank about who I am and whether or not I get paid. No, I don't get paid. But I actually am an alumni of Urban Habitat, BCLI program, and Urban Habitat is an organization that is interested in improving the lives of low-income communities of color and training us who aren't normally represented in commissions like this to come and speak out and be participants. So that's who I am. But I'm also a resident of Oakland and am an avid user of public transportation. I ride my bike, I use BART, I take AC Transit, I've done it all. And I transport myself from the East Bay to Contra Costa to San Francisco and all over. So I have a lot of experience with transportation. This is the first time I've come to this commission meeting, and so I'm a little taken aback about the atmosphere here. I did not expect this. I personally am great with agendas. I like them. I like to follow them so I can understand the process and understand where to participate. I'm not necessarily complaining about what has happened tonight. What it tells me is that obviously there is some work that needs to be done, that you have so far have not done a very good job with public participation, and now you're getting the feedback of that. So I really hope that you're taking notes on this and just being a little bit more intentional about the process in the future. One thing that I do agree with is that in public participation, you really need to focus on your audience, not so much what you need, but what the audience needs in order for them to be able to participate. So for example, this meeting tonight was very difficult for me to get here on time because I work from 9 to 5:30. So to be able to come out from Contra Costa to get here in time for the meeting was a little bit difficult for me. So maybe the next time you plan these meetings to think about what time you're having them and whether or not your audience is going to be able to attend the meeting and be able to stay until the end. Another thing to think about is the reading comprehension and the language capacity of the audience that you want to reach out to. I noticed that you have this wonderful 40-page report here on your participation plan. I haven't had a chance to read it, and even though I am a college graduate and all that stuff, and I could read it, but you got to understand there's some people out there who may not be able to read the whole thing and comprehend it in the time that you allowed them to read it and come to this meeting. So that's another thing to consider. You also want to consider having translation translation for those who don't speak English so that they can also participate in the meeting. Just some other things and examples of what you need to do if you want to really be truly intentional and get the audience that you're trying to outreach. My second comment is about social media. I am an avid social media user. I've been tweeting about this meeting ever since I got here. So I do agree that social media is a way to reach out to community, but it's also should be used as a supplement, not your main way of reaching out. So these public meetings are also very important because there's not everyone that's going to be on social media. But I have some other suggestions on specific ways to use social media to do outreach, which I will try to write down. But I just wanted to put this comment in public. Thank you.
My name's Burma Thiessen. I'm a resident of Lafayette, and I'm here representing the Lafayette Homeowners Council. We have, over these past 3 years, participated in a lot of your meetings, and no one else would agree to come but me, so here I am. And I was late because, 6:30 is a hard time to get someplace. I think PDAs need to be city-driven by each city. The Bay Area has 5 mini-climates. There's hills, valleys, creeks, both above and below ground. And then when you talk about central planning, when you have that kind of demographics in the Bay Area, a place of over 5 million people, you can't have a blanket. It doesn't work. It's too much. There's too many differences in just the geography. California was built on the automobile. It's the most liberating machine ever made. Just so you know, I've lived in New York City, Oslo, Norway, spent a great deal of time in London, Hong Kong, lived in Tokyo for several years. When we had our first child, we bought a car in Tokyo, a city of 10 million people. No matter what, when you have little children, a car is the way to go. We have our own business. We transportation in raw materials, meet a lot of people from all over the world, have a lot of contacts with new things. And when you're talking about envisioning something in the future, I'll tell you what's coming, something called SAR gas, and it removes the CO2 from gasoline. Can you believe that? Then they pump it back into the ground to get more oil out. But by the time it gets to use, there are no pollutants in it. Another wonderful thing is coming along the way is laser treatment of wastewater. And a reverse osmosis process. This is all going to take a few years, but it's coming, okay? So believe in the future. Thank you very much.
My name is Bob Allen. I was a director of BART for 14 years. And I wrote, as soon as I got the word of this meeting, about a week ago, I wrote a long letter suggesting transportation is MTC's middle name. And yet they seem to be more concerned about things other than transportation. The MTC has been promoting the high-speed rail, for example, and the blended rail concept, which when the 2008 measure came before the public, it was for the safe, reliable high-speed passenger train bond act. High-speed blended rail was not safe. It's not reliable. And to use blended rail, to use Caltrain with trains running at 125 miles an hour past all those station platforms across cross streets, it's insane. And yet MTC backs that with, and I've written in opposition to the High-Speed Rail Commission. I'll be going up and talking more about that. The possibility of BART around the bay. It's a beautiful possibility. And one agency, instead of having two different rail systems. The big problem with regional rail, as they mentioned in the earlier reports, were connectivity and governance. And MTC has so much possibility of bringing the agencies together so that we would have a 5-county rapid transit. The possibility of an interchange station at West Oakland where BART crosses over the rail line. I have been pushing for a transfer station there. Now, there are many things. I've been actively working, writing letters. It wasn't until this afternoon, about 3 o'clock, that I got a semi-answer from John Goodwin, I believe his name is, of MTC. Not enough time to answer. I think that you can get more public participation by dealing with transportation issues, transportation potential, instead of dealing all of this is a process. Thank you.
So, Mr. Allen, I'm reading your letter while I'm here, and I'm glad John got back to you today. We always enjoy hearing from you. Your insights are always very good. So thank you for spending the time. Peter,
I just have a quick.
And you will. Yeah. And you will. Hold tight just for a second. So I just want to be sure for those who have not had an opportunity to speak. I think Peter has taken a second go here, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Which is going to happen. Okay. You've been very patient. So our objective here, I know it's a difficult one, isn't so much to have a long discussion about the plan and its merits or its demerits or whether or not it was good or bad or whether or not we like the fact that we even have to do it at all. But really is to find a way so we can hear your voices while we do that next plan. So the real objective here, and I think it was touched on a couple of places, is what we can do better to try to find communities that want a voice in this process so we can try to reach them. So, Peter, I'm going to have you go, and after you're finished, for those of you who want to try to give us some insights into how we can better get to you and your community to, the analogy was made about the Blue Angels. Everyone seems to know they're flying, but no one knows we're doing the plan. That doesn't really shock me, but that's a fact of life. So for those of you who want to stick around, we're going to have staffs at every table to take notes about what you think we ought to do to try to reach your community. So as soon as, you're done, that's what we're going to do next. So please.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Rentschler. And I wanted to get a point of clarification from you about something you said, but I'd like to echo your point about Mr. Allen's commentary. I've read a lot of comments on Plan B area, and I don't always agree with everything that's in your commentary, but I read your comment letters, and they're really outstanding. Your work on behalf, just as a citizen advocate on behalf of mass transit, is really exemplary, and I really appreciate what you've done as a fellow citizen. So my question of clarification, Mr. Rentschler, for you is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said something to the effect of, we will not allow this process that one commented to intimidate another. And I'd like you to restate that because I want to get really what you're trying to say, what you're trying to communicate to us. And then I want to, because you're obviously in that case, or at least, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, referring to the discussion between Mr. Brooks and Mr. Garcia. And if you found that intimidating, I'm really worried.
And it doesn't matter what we think. What matters is we create an environment where people can come up and speak what they want to say.
Agreed.
And they don't need to answer any questions from anybody. They can come up here and speak their mind.
That's correct.
And that's the end of it. Okay? So the point here is whatever you want to say, I'm going to listen to, all right? And I'm not going to question you, and I'm not going to comment about it. I'm just going to listen. And I think the key is everyone deserves that respect in this meeting. And we don't need to ask people to justify themselves, to explain their organization's behavior or any such thing. So I think where the line is around here is you get to speak to us, you get to make your comment. I would hopefully you would do it in some sense of professionalism about your views, and let's just leave the rest aside.
Respectfully, I completely disagree with your conclusion, if this in fact is your conclusion, that a person's professional affiliations or asking about them are irrelevant and verboten. It's not. I don't think, and I'd be interested what Mr. Garcia thought. I don't think that what Mr. Brooks said, the questions he asked you were rude or
really seriously
disrespectful.
You can take this in some other form, but we're not going to have this kind of thing at the expense of everyone that's here.
Okay. Well, then to wrap up, it is relevant that at these meetings that about 3/4 of the people submitting public comments are average citizens, and about 1/4 are employees of stakeholder groups. They have a right to be here. Their voices have a right to be heard equally with everybody else. But it is relevant that they are funded to advance these programs. They are funded by your agencies to advance these programs. You cannot, by law, under the Brown Act, require someone to give their name, their location, their affiliation. You can ask for that. You can say respectfully, if you'd like to give that, that would be helpful for us. Their affiliation, and if they're getting funding from MTC, is relevant to the discussion. It doesn't mean that their views are non-valuable. They're valuable. But they have a point of view. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
I just want to make one very brief comment. I found it very curious, Mr. Rentschler, that, do I have your name? Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Thank you. That you seem to feel that people engaging in a discussion with each other are acting disrespectfully. You're just here to listen. There ought to be a conversation, not just listening. There ought to be and that's what's missing from this process, a real conversation. You're going to sit there, take notes, and then what? There ought to be a debate about all the big issues that were controversial last time. This is what I said last Tuesday morning, starting with the population projections. A conversation and a real debate, not just taking notes, sitting there. It's not respectful to us not to allow us to have a discussion. It's condescending and patronizing.
So what we're going to do, for those of you who want to help us reach you, and you feel comfortable doing it, we're going to have staff members at every table here. I'm also going to be here. I just want to be sure that we're crystal clear. The goal here is to not discuss the attributes or the negatives or the positives of the plan overall. We're going to have an entire year to do that. What we really would like is for us to be able to be instructed by you so that we can better get to you and your communities so we can better hear them over the next couple of years. So again, thank you for your time, and we'll be around here. We're going to wrap this up no later than 8:30.
There was no mention